From the Fatheads Eyewear studio in Indianapolis, Indiana, this is The Skinny.
Maybe I need to start in the trash truck business.
Don't rule it out.
But the steering, the spokes on the wheel straight ahead, the steering's broken. Bridges takes the wheel and he goes, whoa, whoa.
He's airborne and then I'm above him
Inverted.
all at the same time. Yeah, you're just like, wow, that's a wild picture.
He gets behind the race car and he tells me if I'm good or not, and if I'm good, he'll go, perfect.
I hang up on the guy. I go, who's this? This is Deion Sanders. I go, yeah, nice try. See you later.
Bounce and then this insane roll. That thing sent it.
I hate qualifying. It's the worst. It's literally the worst thing you could ever do.
But I'm smooth and creamy like milk chocolate. Have you ever not saw a Hershey bar that did not look good?
Hi, I'm Tony Stewart.
I'm Mario Andretti.
I'm Johnny Rutherford.
I'm Angel Sampe.
I'm Travis Pastrana.
This is Antron Brown.
Hi, I'm Jagger Jones, and this is The Skinny.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The Skinny. We're here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Can't wait to get this one going here. I'm Ken Stout. Rico Elmore has joined me. That is Jagger Jones sitting on the set with us here today. And Michael Young, the track dude, as always, running the controls. Jagger Jones, if you're not familiar with him, maybe you're familiar with his legendary grandfather, Parnelli Jones, his father, PJ, also a very accomplished racer, and his uncle, Page, was well on his way as well before he had a nasty sprint car wreck at Eldora back in 1994, well before he was born, but I think he won like 18 of 42 or 48 races or something that year, but he was ripping, man. Page was a wheeler as well, and I watched a little bit of, I read a little bit on him, and I think there was a small documentary that came out on him as well. I think it's Godspeed, the life of Page Jones, and it looked pretty cool, man, to be honest with you. I was surprised to see that, and I would urge people to watch it, but man, he was a ripper as well, and obviously you were born substantially, I guess nearly 20 years later. Is that right? Not, 94. You were born in 02. So yes. Yeah, but by the time you probably put together, your uncle and have some memories, you're probably, he's probably 20 years past that devastating moment. But what I was impressed with was his recovery. I mean, it was a wreck where he literally was dead. I think lifed out, coded a couple times, and man, talk about a scrapper that had to fight back just to get to where he could walk, and now looks like he functions really well.
Yeah, I think they said when he went into the hospital that night, like you said, he got in a sprint car crash at Eldora. He was leading, got upside down by himself, and Dave Darland came running second, just nowhere to go, hit him. The wheel actually got into the roll cage, made direct contact to his head, so it was a massive brain injury. But I think that when he went to the hospital, it was like a 1% chance he would be alive by the morning. And he spent 2 years without walking, talking. But it's really a miracle and an inspiration where he's gotten to this point. He has 2 kids, my cousin Jimmy and Joey. Jimmy's racing go-karts now, having fun. He plays hockey as well. But yeah, there was almost no chance of him surviving. And now he has a whole nother life after racing. Obviously, he wasn't able to ever race again, which is sad and unfortunate, but it's a miracle that he even survived that accident.
Yeah, a real source of inspiration, obviously. I mean, your entire family, man, boy, just super talented individuals, of course, starting off there with your grandfather. I'd actually be really interested in what his dad was like as well, because...
Yeah, do you know anything about your great-grandfather?
I don't really. I knew they were from Arkansas.
Yeah, it's from Arkansas, which I would associate Parnelli from being, from California. I didn't realize he was from Arkansas.
Yeah, I never really got to know much about him, and obviously he passed away much before I was born. But yeah, my grandpa, young age, then moved to California, grew up in California, started racing jalopies under a fake name. Like, his name is Rufus. It's not even Parnelli, because I always get so many questions of like, where did Parnelli come from? And it was because he had to make a fake identification to race because he was under 21 years old.
Right.
And I think his middle name was Parnell, but there was a girl they teased him about in class, and her name was Nellie. And when his friend went to go sign him up for the race, he put Parnelli Jones. And then he started winning, doing well. And now you can't come out and say, oh, I've been faking my age and my name this whole time. So he just had to run with it. And he started getting fame and popularity locally and then more on a national level with that name. And he just had to stick with it. And I do appreciate the people that always would call him Rufus just to,
just to
know
get
the history.
Robin Miller would call him Rufus.
That's the first person that came to my mind when I said that, is Robin Miller.
Yeah, of course, Robin would be on point with that. It's super cool because I think also, like you said, not only was he underage, but I think they were also trying to hide his name from his parents, knowing that he was racing. They didn't want him racing. So.
Everybody in that era, I mean, the Andrettis, I mean, all those guys, they definitely masked their names so nobody would know who they were, and it got out pretty quick who they were.
And it was so dangerous too, where it's like,
right.
Obviously,
that's why they didn't want him racing, right?
Because danger and element now, but in that era, like he would say when he was starting the Indy 500, you look left, you look right, and if one of those two guys weren't dead by the end of the year, it was going to be you. That was just your odds of surviving in that era. And obviously it's a bit different now, but there's still that element of racing, but not like it was back in the day. And I didn't want to. I just wanted to focus on racing. But it was like the best excuse for me to move to North Carolina.
The Skinny is brought to you by Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04. And American Coach. Innovation is our life force.
That young man graduated from High Point University on the dean's list with a business degree and a minor in finance. Congratulations on that in the midst of all your racing.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's good to be done. I finished in December last year, so now I can put all my efforts towards racing. My grandpa and family were like very persistent on me going to college, and I didn't want to. I just wanted to focus on racing, but it was like the best excuse for me to move to North Carolina when I was 18 to be close.
Get right in the hot bed.
Exactly. So that's good. I grew up in Arizona, and it wasn't easy. Like, there's not a ton of racing there. I raced a lot in California. But when I was doing the NASCAR stuff at that time, I was like, I need to get to North Carolina. And it was like the one thing that made me get out there was to go to school out there. And I did enjoy the experience though. And I think now I'm very grateful that I did that. And I think it'll help with obviously the racing side, but so much outside of life and the connections and people. It was really worth my time.
Oh yeah, I'm sure lessons learned there with a business degree, and much more importantly, that minor in finance will certainly make a lot of sense over here in this industry.
That's what I was going to say.
There's a lot of things that do not make financial sense over here.
That's what I was going to say. I said, you're on the dean's list, so you're clearly intelligent, very smart. How's that work in racing again?
Yeah.
On the finance side?
Yeah, I figured out like, I wouldn't say I'm like very like smart or book smart by an example, but I knew how to like be as efficient as possible and spend like the least amount of time and still do well in school, just so I could like travel and go to races. So like if there's one thing I learned, it was like how to work efficiently,
how to manage time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a good call.
Where is home for you now?
I live here in Indianapolis. I moved here in January. Now trying to do the sports car and the IndyCar side of things. I feel like I have to be here. It's, opportunities happen when you're in the area and in here. So I moved here January.
So speaking of sports cars, you mentioned something before we started the show here, which much to my surprise, I actually watched the race because my son raced in the series for 4 years, but you ran in the Mazda MX-5 Cup race at Martinsville this past weekend.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. I did 5 years of short track racing and late models, ARCA, legend cars. And then when I went to the open wheel side, we did 2 or 3 ovals, but it's so different. It didn't really have that same fun factor of short track racing did those 5 years I was doing it. And it kind of like re-sparked something in me that I didn't realize was still there of the oval side. And it was super fun. I started 7th, but I had a flat tire the whole first 50 lap.
Oh.
I came in at the halfway break with like 8 pounds in the right front tire, just hanging on dead last, like trying to stay on the lead lap.
That's horrible.
And I did, and we changed it. So I started like 20th when we went back for the second 50 laps. And I was driving through the field, and I was up to like 7th in like 10 laps, just one after another. And I went for a pretty risky move, made it 3 wide on a guy. I posted it just on my Instagram, kind of opening up for discussion whether people think it was a penalty or not because they gave me a penalty.
Oh, really?
I sent it in 3 wide. I was just like, I can't wait. I was already on the back foot, having to start in the back and just going for it and short track racing. But I guess IMSA was a little bit more strict, I guess, on the rules for this race.
Yeah, they run sports car stuff, not oval track
exactly.
stuff. Rubbin's racing over
exactly,
there, man.
right? Rubbin's racing, like 3 wide
Put
at
a fender on 'em.
Martinsville. Why not? They were just like, yeah, you were the one that chose to make it 3 wide. So if anything bad happened, it was kind of on you. But I'm like, that's short track racing, but they didn't.
Yeah, and I'm not going to open up the door to this can of worms, but the green white checker restart might have had a little bit of contact in it as well for the win. So, and I love Jared. I work for that team all the time. Jared's a talented racer, but it was a great race to watch, man. And I knew it would be. I actually thought it'd be a little more side by side, but like you said, people were kind of riding that first 50, and then the second 50, they started looking a little more like the Mazdas. But those top 2 were checked out, and usually it's a pack of 10 that are hooked nose to tail, racing.
Yeah, it's a really fun series, and I think like the level of competition is so high in that series. Just there's a lot of guys that have been doing it for a couple of years that maybe have the talent to go a lot further, but just don't have the financial backing to go any further and just keep running that series and do really well. Like I did some other races, and it's really competitive, and it's so different than anything else I've ever done with the drafting and how like loose you have to run the cars. Like,
oh yeah.
You one little mistake and you're like full sideways, like
you gotta have some quick hands.
Yeah, exactly. So it was good, and I mean it feels a bit slow compared to what I've racing, but I think that's where I felt comfortable to make those aggressive moves. But maybe others weren't as comfortable, and maybe the cars were a bit free for them. And yeah, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully they do that again because I'd love to do it. And the prize money too, like 25 grand to win, like that's bigger than almost all late model races.
Yeah, it was a real prize, and that's the beauty of that series, right? It's the best bang for the buck, really, out there when it comes to sports car racing, and it pays big money to win the championship. So people can come back and at least stay in that series. It's not enough money to go run IMSA by any stretch of the imagination, but you could come back and run another season of Mazda MX-5 Cup, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a more competitive series anywhere in the world, to be quite honest with you. And the racecraft you have to be able to read everybody around you. You mentioned the draft. So there's a lot going on, and I've yet to talk to a driver that didn't climb out of one of those things, certainly that are racing up in the front, that didn't say they had an absolute blast.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 of the races. So this year I ran in the LMP3 in the IMSA VP Challenge Series, and we did 5 races this year. I had a really good year. Won 8 out of the 10 races. I guess we did 5 weekends, won 8 out of the 10 races, which went really well. But VIR and Atlanta, I did double duty between the LMP3 and the MX-5, and it was like crazy. I was a little worried about trying to do both because a lot of the races were back to back, where I'd jump out of the LMP3, have 5 minutes, then go start the race for the MX-5, and just like the mind adjustment from those 2 cars was insane. I was just like, it took me like 2 laps to like understand just the differences of the car every time, but it was a fun experience.
Downforce car with a ton of speed to a car with no
V8.
speed and no downforce.
No downforce and lose.
By the way, who were you driving for? What team?
In MX-5, BSI Racing.
Okay, yeah. Shea Holbrook and the gang,
great
wonderful people, for sure. So Jagger Jones on the side with us here. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be on the other side. We're going to talk a little bit about that IMSA LMP3 thing he was mentioning.
I had to go win both races to have a chance to keep racing with them the rest of the year.
No pressure.
Welcome back to the Fatheads Eyewear Studio. We're here in Indianapolis, Indiana, the racing capital of the world, with one of the biggest names in all of motorsports, the last name being Jones, his grandfather Parnelli Jones. This is Jagger Jones, who's joined us here on the set, the young 22-year-old trying to cut his teeth and make his way through this brutal industry, despite having a family legacy that's almost unrivaled. Only a couple of names, I would say, that would join you there, and certainly, the Andretti's would be part of that. AJ Foyt, one of those guys that bounced around with all the different disciplines like your grandfather, of course. But let's focus back on you a little bit as you're trying to make your own name here. You mentioned the VP Challenge. I had the pleasure of spotting for the AWA team the previous year, which was running LMP3 cars on the WeatherTech side. So we were part of all the big endurance races and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very familiar with the class that you were competing in there with LMP3. But the VP Challenge is a shorter race. You guys run double headers every weekend. No driver change, is that correct?
Yeah.
So you stay in it the whole time.
Yeah, it was just me this year. Yeah, like you said, we had 2 45-minute races. I missed the opening round in Daytona. The team, I came up with the ride coming. I didn't have any racing plan this year at all. And about 2 weeks before the race in St. Pete, I got a call from this team, Fast MD, Remstar Racing, and something didn't work out with the driver that they had at Daytona. And they said, we want to win this team championship. I did one race with them the year before. It went really well. They said, we want you to come to St. Pete. You've driven this track. You've done well here, podiumed here. We trust in you. And we went out and did St. Pete, won both the races there. And that led to them putting me in the car for the whole season. So it was a great opportunity. I knew going into that race, like I had to prove myself. I had to go win both races to have a chance to keep racing with them the rest of the year.
No pressure.
No pressure, exactly. On a street course too, where
right.
I also too had to take a bit of risk. And luckily, they didn't make me come and bring money to race, but I had to cover all my own crash damage. So I took a bit of a risk on that. Luckily, it paid off.
That's
even
not a
at
bit
St.
of a risk.
Pete.
That's a big risk.
But
At
in
St. Pete
racing,
especially.
you have
St.
to.
Pete, Concrete
And,
Canyon, man.
Exactly. And so that went really well. And then we went and did Mid-Ohio, won both the races there. And then we raced at Mosport, Canadian Tire, and then Virginia and Atlanta. And we just, every week we were just getting better and better, winning. We won 8 out of the 10 races. The 2 we didn't win was a DQ for 1 millimeter of camber. Just a small mistake, but that's racing, right? It's a fine line of what works and what doesn't, even if it wasn't on purpose or something could move during the race. And then one of the races at Atlanta, I won, but I had made a mistake myself and moved over too early at the start, so they took that one away. But we were able to close out with the team championship, 8 out of 10 wins. It was a great year for me to, win the championship for the team that trusted in me, and also to, get my name out there and winning. If you're winning, people are going to think about you. Your name's in their mind. If you're racing a series, even if it's really competitive and you're doing well but not winning, a lot of people forget about you, and you're not in the headlines, and that's what you need as a race car driver coming up. So it was a great year for that for me.
For the fans at home, you said moved over too quick. What's that mean?
Yeah, so on the IMSA rules at the start, you have to be side by side. I was on the inside column, and the way Road Atlanta works, where you start the race is actually in a corner. So on the exit of the corner, before I got to the start line, I moved back over to the normal racing line where I had to stay on the inside column. I was already clear of the guy on my outside. I got a really good jump at the start. I looked in the mirror and I said, I'm clear. I'm going to move over like I normally would, but I wasn't thinking fully about the rule that IMSA has where you have to stay on the inside column until after you start
you got to stay in formation till you get to start finish. And that only happens on the initial start. The restart, you take off, you're good to go. Racing wherever you're at, you can start passing.
Oh, I got you. Like no passing on the restart.
And I was the leader too, so I have control of the start. But I got such a good jump, and when I looked up in the mirror, I just saw I was clear, and I said, okay, now I'm gonna move back over to the normal racing line without fully.
And
I was more in race mode, not start mode at that point. And and it just, I always think in racing, I have a mental coach that I've talked to and worked with a bit, and it's your mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And I was focused at looking at the mirror. I wasn't focused on exactly what I needed to be doing when I probably didn't even need to look at the mirror. And that caused me to make a mistake and do the wrong thing
That's
at the
muscle
time.
memory, man.
Exactly.
I think I'd probably rather have you looking in the mirror default to that than not. And that turn is pretty tight. I mean, people don't realize that last turn coming on the front straightaway there at Road Atlanta is pretty tight, pretty narrow. And then, of course, you want to be the outside lane to open up turn number 1.
Yeah, and the LMP3 car, that corner's flat out, and it's pretty easy flat, but there's a ginormous bump on the entry, And like the first 2 laps with heavy fuel, cold tires, it gets a little hairy, but like first lap of the race, I had to beat another guy to win the team championship. And first lap coming through there, I wasn't gonna lift. It's a pretty easy flat corner, but I just got the bump wrong, and I was like full sideways crossed up like 140 miles an hour. And then it let him close up, and we went side by side into through 1 and 3, and luckily I cleared him.
Jagger Jones in the studio with us. We're going to take a quick break here and chat a little bit more with him about his career when we come back.
If I'm not racing and there's a race going on, I have to go and have to talk to people, whether you like it or not. It's, not always the most fun, but you got to put your name out there. And, if I'm sitting at home, then nothing's going to happen.
Welcome back to the Skinny. We're here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We have Jagger Jones on the show with us here today, chatting about his young career and his path forward. Hey, I want to put a button on the VP Challenge thing that we were just talking about because you had so much success. Had you been able to run Daytona, some quick guerrilla math tells me you win that championship all across the board.
Yeah, definitely. We would have won it, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. But I think in sports car racing, the team championship is just as important. And it was good to get the team that victory because they had Remstar, Fast MD Racing. They provided me with a great opportunity. And for them, their goal is to eventually go back into the WeatherTech endurance races. So that was their goal. Go win this championship, keep building their name in the IMSA series. And that's what we did. And that's what I was brought in to do. So it was great for them to give me that opportunity and then to reward them with what I was brought there to do.
So for the fans at home, so there's a team championship and a driver's championship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So with that said, what are the plans for 2025? Will you guys compete in WeatherTech, or what are their plans? Or back in VP Challenge?
So I am not fully certain of what my plans are. I've been trying to find a ride in the endurance races for IMSA. Being a silver driver, they have to bring in a third driver for GTD and LMP2. That's a silver, which is me. But it's been tough, even with the wins and everything. A lot of teams want a lot of money. Sports car racing, I found out, is very expensive. Even when you go to Daytona, 24 hours, you're there for 2 weeks. You have, I don't even know how many set of tires to run all the testing and 24 hours of racing, crew, all the wear it puts on the car. So it's a very expensive, even if it's only 5 races. So I haven't really been able to get too far along yet with that side, but I'm working on that. I've talked to some sports car teams over in Europe. I raced Indy Next the following year, formerly Indy Lights. And I think there's still a lot for me to prove in that series on the open wheel side that I know I can do with the right team, the right situation. So I've been talking to some teams and people still on the IndyCar side as well. So I think there is a lot of choices, but a lot of it comes down to having the right people support me to get me there, meeting the right people, sponsors. I know I'm going to be racing an SRO with this team next year.
Oh, nice.
Which is a great series.
Sure.
And it'll give me some GTD and GT4 experience, which, there's a lot of manufacturers involved in that series, which is great because a lot of them, have the financial backing to grab young drivers and put them in their development program. So I'm excited, looking forward to that. But right now that's on the schedule, but I'm hopefully going to be adding some more races as well.
What's a number to run the 24? Is it $100,000 and a GTD car?
To do the whole thing to just not per driver, but the whole cost is about $1 million to run the 24 hours to Daytona.
Really?
Yeah.
Just the 24 hours a Daytona?
Yeah, that's the
in
total
a GTD
cost.
Car? Yeah. So they'll break it up. They'll have 4 different drivers.
Yeah, 4 drivers.
So, you're looking at a quarter.
Yeah, at least. But a lot of times, like the pro drivers, the 2 pros they're getting paid.
They're not
right.
Yeah, so it gets expensive quick.
So if you can find that little nugget where maybe you don't have to bring anything, you're not getting paid anything, but maybe you don't bring anything. It at least provides an opening to get you in the car and gives you an opportunity to do it. And as you mentioned before, the big thing in that world is crash damage. You you hurt one of those GT3 cars and you've spent some money.
Yeah, I know. I've learned a lot about. I didn't learn too much of it, I guess, at school about insurance this year, but that's a big thing too in the sports car world, which helps. But yeah, I mean, it's expensive. You hit a wall, it doesn't even look the worst sometimes. And like I've heard numbers of like 400,000.
Yeah, it's a tough gig. I don't envy your position at all. Trust me, we've been there for a number of years. I know exactly the pain you're going through. But hey, man, you don't know unless you try. You got to
Yeah,
swing the
exactly.
bat. And you're out there making a name for yourself. You got a bunch of wins, so I'm sure
Mhm.
people are watching.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year, and I've enjoyed it. I moved here to Indianapolis. I've probably been at, I think I was counting. I've been at like 30 something weekends already this year at racetracks. So it's been insane doing a lot of coaching, a lot of driving, and then just also too, if I'm not racing and there's a race going on, I have to go and have to talk to people, whether you like it or not. It's not always the most fun, but you got to put your name out there. And if I'm sitting at home, then nothing's going to happen. So I always make my effort to be at the racetrack, hopefully coaching at least, but sometimes just going there to meet with people, talk with people, because you never know what could come of it. Who was the toughest team owner you ever drove for? And then he really laughed and he said, Parnelli.
The Skinny is brought to you by American Coach. American Coach, innovation is our life force. And Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04.
Welcome back to the Skinny. Great to have Michael Young with us running the controls today.
Try to keep up on it.
That's not even true.
Great job, pal.
Taking a lot of abuse back here.
Hey, you are our next best choice.
We called everybody before we called you.
Shoot.
It's another way to make you feel good.
Right.
We tried everybody else first.
Having a great time here on the Skinny. Jagger Jones has joined us here. Great picking his brain a little bit and always getting a feel of just how difficult this industry is, even with a name like he has, to come up through here and try to make your own way, which is exactly what he's doing. No small task. Hey, man, let's go back a couple of steps. I know you're only 22 years old, but how did it all begin for you? What was your first opportunity and when did you start?
Yeah, so I think when I was about 6 years old, I got a go-kart for my birthday, kind of the normal story. But my mom did like everything to kind of stop it that she could. She made us play like
I couldn't imagine why.
basketball, soccer. I played like every sport you can imagine.
She's
And I
trying to
think-
wear you out with everything
yeah,
else.
exactly. She was just trying to distract us from the go-kart sitting in the garage. But me and my brother drove it around a little bit. But I got too big for it, and my dad bought me another go-kart when I was about 10 years old, and I drove that. And the next weekend, we were like, oh, let's just go try. There's a local race in Phoenix that
Yeah, we'll
weekend.
still try it.
And by that next January, we were driving to California every single Thursday, coming back on, Sunday at midnight, going to school Monday. And it was just, and it took off from there. I almost won like the first regional race. It was like a 4 wide going into like the last lap, and we all wrecked each other going for the lead. But I think that was just like, all right, I feel like, after only a couple months of doing this and, doing well, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I loved watching NASCAR, IndyCar, everything as a kid. And, once I started racing, it was just my own passion, just instantly.
That 4 wide was setting him up for the Freedom 100.
Yeah.
That used to be a really good race.
Yeah, right. Did you have any idea about your grandfather at that point in time?
Yeah,
Your uncle, your dad,
for sure. Yeah.
their talents.
Yeah, I think because I watched so much racing as a kid and I went to a lot of races with them, went to the track with my grandpa, I think it's pretty, even at
He's
a
the
young
mayor.
age, walking around Indianapolis Motor Speedway with Parnelli Jones, it's pretty obvious, even if you're 5 years old, to tell he's a big deal.
Uncle Bobby said this of Parnelli, or of Rufus, if you will. He said that if he would have concentrated on Indy and ran IndyCar like the rest of them did, and not ran sports car and this and that, he said he would have far eclipsed anybody else there in wins at the 500 and championships. He said he was that good. And he is, but he just had everything else that he was running, the sports car stuff, or you know, whatever he got in, he was majorly talented.
He was making a living out of it when in an industry where people didn't make a living. And I think in order to do that, they had to run all those different, you know, disciplines, right?
Yeah, I think too, like what a lot of people don't realize, like, yeah, he has, you know, the one Indy 500 win compared to like AJ or not, I guess Mario as well, but AJ or the Unsers. But he only did, I think, 6 or 7 Indy 500s. He retired when he was like 32 years old, and even earlier than that from IndyCar and the Indy 500. I think he, you know, started to get involved in business and having a family and didn't want to risk his life in that era. And he almost won. Like I think his like lap led percentage at the 500 is insanely high.
Crazy.
Yeah, was it 67 on the turbine car? I mean, he nearly won that race.
You know,
well, I think only a couple laps left.
Ago, yeah,
and they had a mechanical failure. Yeah. Obviously, he won 63.
Did pretty well with some real estate stuff out in that sunny
He won
area.
it 2 more times as
California.
a team owner with Al Unser driving.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, he had a great track record.
My buddy lived in his neighborhood, so he lived.
California.
He lived up the hill a bit more. And Andrew Gilliland, he lived when he moved out to California when Toyota's North America was located out there. He lived down the hill a little bit from where Parnelli's place was.
Yeah. And I mean, they ran the whole IndyCar team out. I think they did have a shop here in Indy, but most of it was all ran out of Torrance, California. He ran the F1 team for a couple of years when he had Mario driving them with Firestone as the sponsor. I think it was early 70s, maybe 71 and 72. And they ran the F1 program out of Torrance, California, which is insane if you think about it in today's era. And a lot of people don't realize, like, he was they were the last American team in Formula One before Haas came in a couple of years ago. So like they were serious too, just as much of how successful his own racing career was. The team, even though it didn't go on for super long, like won all those 500s with Unsers and went to Formula One. Mario is pretty impressive. I did a podcast interview and I got to interview Mario a couple months ago in May. And I was like, I have some rapid fire questions. I was like, who is the toughest guy you've ever raced against? And he laughed and he said, Parnelli. And then I said, well, who was the toughest team owner you ever drove for? And then he really laughed and he said, Parnelli. and I can believe it. I think I was lucky being the grandson and seeing him later in his life. I saw more of
He's chilled out.
Nicer family grandpa side of him rather than the your boss side of him.
Awesome stuff. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise.
Exactly.
Once again, we'll take a quick break here. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Want to get the skinny on other guests in different types of motorsports? Check out our YouTube page and get the skinny.
Jagger Jones was the Rookie of the Year in 2022 for the UFS. Did I say that right?
USF.
2000. It was one of those in there. It was.
You had all the right letters.
Yeah, right.
It is
Just
one
gotta
letter.
order. You put them in a different order. But Rookie of the Year in that season. Congratulations on that. I think finished 4th in the points. A win at Barber. How cool is that? What a beautiful track. And then up to Indy next in 2023, and a real good showing at the Detroit GP of all places. I mean, talk about a brutal track. You mentioned St. Pete before. I think Detroit's substantially harder. At any rate, the open wheel side of things has come together a little bit as well.
Yeah, so 2019, I did the ARCA, or it was called K&N West Series back in the day. I finished 2nd in the championship, had a great year, thought I had some opportunity to do some truck series stuff in 2020, and I was pretty much fully set on NASCAR at that point. I'd already been racing late models for 2 years, and COVID happened. The deal I was working for trucks didn't end up being able to come through, and I didn't have any money beyond that to go racing anymore. And that was when I went out to North Carolina to go to school. I didn't race at all for 2020 or 2021. And I was kind of obviously every day working to figure out opportunity. And I found some people that wanted to help, but the NASCAR stuff to move up to the truck level was just so expensive if you wanted to do it right and be with a winning capable team. And I kind of evaluated, and I said, well, I've already, taken a 2-year break. I said, maybe I go give this open wheel thing a try, because I've always loved IndyCar racing, always, known I've wanted to try to race the Indianapolis 500. And I did that. We did some testing at the end of 2021, went really well. Signed with Cape Motorsports to do the full 2020 season. I'd never driven an open wheel car, never done any races. First weekend, St. Pete, we went and finished third. Second.
How many cars?
I think there's about 22 cars.
Yeah.
22 or 23.
Yeah, that's why I thought.
Yeah, it was a really
good series.
Yeah, very competitive. A lot of guys were coming back for their second, third year. And it was funny because there was a lot of kids that I'd raced in karting 8 years, for sure, 5 or 6 years before that. And then I won the second weekend at Barber, did really well at Indy. And like halfway through the season, I was leading the points. And I was like, I didn't know what to expect going into it. I'd never driven anything even similar except for karting, I guess, which is still a big jump to a Formula car. And then the second half of the season, we had like, I think, a mechanical and a crash, and it kind of took me out of the points race. But I really enjoyed it. And the team I was with, Cape Motorsports, was moving up to Indy next the following year. And I was able to make that happen, sign the deal with them. I knew it was going to be a challenge, me only having 1 year of open wheel experience. A lot of people were saying I was crazy to go to the Indy next level. And the team being a new team, there was going to be a lot to learn. And we started okay. And we had a good finish, like you mentioned, second at Detroit, which was crazy. It was the first year downtown at Detroit where it was like
Brutal
felt like
track.
an off-road track. Maybe that's
Off-road's a great way to describe it. Are you good with that, Michael?
Perfect. Yes, 100%.
I remember like
100%.
the first lap around there, I was just like, yeah, they're probably going to cancel this race. Like, there's no way they make this work. It was like first and second gear every corner. And in the Indy next car, first gear is like no other place you use it. It's like solely for launching out of the pit box. And we were like 2 corners in first gear. It was crazy.
It's like, we need 6 to 8 inches of wheel travel here.
Yeah.
What's the damper
Yeah.
package?
Yeah. So I had some good finishes, but I just don't really ever think we were like competitive enough to compete with like Andretti and HMD, which are, IndyCar teams or IndyCar level teams, being the first year, which was a bit unfortunate. I think it like kind of put like slowed down my career in a sense. Like I was saying earlier, like you have to be winning, you have to be doing well. So maybe looking back, maybe it wasn't the right move for my career at the time, but you just, you never know. And the financial side was a bit more possible. I didn't have the funding to go race in that series with Andretti or a top team. So it was what I could make happen. And I feel like I made, the most of what I had, but like I was saying, it didn't lead to me doing another year in this series. I didn't come up with the money for this year, 2024. I did 1 race this year in this series, just kind of a fill-in deal. But I loved the open wheel. The Indy next car, it's fast. Like you're only a couple seconds off the Indy car, which is insane. And I would love to do it again with a really competitive team. I can't do this. Like I just need to hold on. And I'm like, all right, no worries. Like I got the GPS up here, and he was like, not screaming, but I could tell he wanted to.
The Skinny is brought to you by Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04. And American Coach, innovation is our life force.
Welcome back to the Skinny. We have Jagger Jones on the set with us, and both of my colleagues here have asked him independently, different times while one was not in the other room, have you run off-road? So me doing homework that I do, I was fortunate enough to see that you have run the Nora 1000. I was intrigued, though, with the person you ran it with, Don Prudhomme.
Yep.
The snake.
The snake. That was a cool experience. We split the driving. I probably did 2/3 or so, which was nice. And he's just an awesome guy. The stories, and I was 16 years old at the time. He was, I think, 78 or 79. So we had like both ends of the spectrum, but it was a cool story. And we had a lot of fun doing it. I remember we didn't, most of the day, it's a 5-day kind of rally race in Mexico. We started in Ensenada, went all the way down to Cabo. And the first 4 days, we never rode with each other. We had a separate co-driver, but we'd split the driving. And then the last day, I was like, I'm going to ride with you the first stage, and then we'll get out for the second stage. We'll switch, and I'll drive, and you'll ride with me and navigate. And about the first one went okay, and I was helping him kind of point some things out, and he was getting better and faster. And then when I got in and drove, he was like, tried to navigate for like the first minute. He goes, I can't do this. Like, I just need to hold on. And I'm like, all right, no worries. Like, I got the GPS up here. And he was like, not screaming, but I could tell he wanted to.
Yeah.
And we got out, and he's like, I don't know how you do that. That's like insane. But just
this coming from him.
Yeah. But I guess, going 300 miles an hour to him seems normal, but going 60 sideways around a corner is crazy.
Yeah, or through some sort of 3-foot wash at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah. But that was a really cool experience, and I didn't maybe know a lot about him and drag racing as much before, but after that he invited me, and I went out to, I think, in Phoenix at the NHRA event and spent a day with him there. And it's like,
he's the king.
It's like walking around with your grandfather at Indy. Yeah.
That's really cool, man.
Mhm.
That is
it was
awesome.
an awesome experience.
How did that relationship come to be?
I'm honestly trying to remember. Well, he did it the year before. I don't remember who he did it
I didn't
with,
know if there was
but-
a relationship with him and your grandfather, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, they've always been good friends, and Don started to do some of the off-road stuff, and it just worked out. I did it the year before with my brother, and then Don wanted someone who, wanted to do more than half of the race to come in, and when he
because
got tired,
he didn't want to.
yeah, when he got tired, or your back hurts after doing 1,200 miles out in that desert.
About 1,200, yeah. Well, if you're 79, it hurts way before.
I can only imagine. Yeah. So, I'm trying to remember exactly, but I just know it was such a cool experience, a really fun week. We had like a ton of issues with the car. So I remember like the whole week I didn't even sleep. Like, I was staying up every night with the crew trying to get the turbo wastegate fixed, and it was a mess, but we made the most of it.
Hey, real quickly, we're going to wrap things up here. Didn't ask you anything about your brother at all, but I heard rumors that your brother can throw down pretty good.
Yeah, my brother, so he was racing. He raced go-karts. He's 2 years younger than me, and then he did some NASCAR stuff. He was doing really well, but kind of the same thing where you don't have the money to keep racing, and he went and took his, I guess, aggression a different way.
He just started beating people up instead?
Yeah, exactly. So now he's on the road. He's trying to become an MMA fighter. He wants to be in the UFC. He trains at a gym with, 10, 15 UFC guys that go beat him up every day in training. He sends me a picture every other week. Like last week, he had 8 stitches in his forehead.
That'll fix you.
Nose is sideways, but he's a tough kid. He loves it. He like absolutely loves it, and like he has to take a week off of training or whatever for some reason, and it builds up in him, and he's got to go let it out. But he's a great kid, and I went and watched his first fight about a year ago today. I knocked the guy out in 47 seconds.
Wow,
he's an animal. So I'm a big UFC fan as well, so it's cool that.
Is he tall like you?
No, he's a bit shorter, but weighs about the same. He fights at like 155.
Okay.
That's insane. He's got to cut 15 pounds for his fights, which is a whole nother gnarly aspect.
Yeah.
It'll be cool to watch him. I know my mom is like, what did I do possibly wrong?
Right. She's like, okay, you can race now.
Yes, right. Yeah. Get back in the car.
Now an MMA fighter.
Back in the
And
car.
she's like I was saying earlier, like she's not that way. Like she didn't want us to even race, and now she is like the two craziest sports that most people can think of.
the way it
Racing,
goes, man.
racing and beating people.
That's the way it goes. The fans can't see him, but Dakota Armstrong's also sitting in here as well. So if you ever decide to go the sprint car midget racing route, you could probably use your brother. I'd have him in the pits because they get a little sporty afterwards from time to time.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Love having Jagger Jones on here as we talked about the name and the legacy that goes with it is just absolutely second to none. So great to have you on here. Tell your story a little bit. Let people know you're scrapping for yourself, looking to make your own name. Sorry about the passing of your grandfather, obviously earlier this year. But boy, we appreciate everything he's done for this industry and your father and your uncle as well. I'm glad to hear your uncle, his recovery has gone as good as it's gone. And we wish you the best of luck going forward, man.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome stuff. Jagger Jones. We'll see you next week.